Welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Pastor Rick Utze from Maranatha in Plain City, Ohio. You know, I had to officiate a funeral today, and in doing that, in preparation for that, I went back to John 11, which was when Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead. And I noticed something in that story that I hadn't really noticed before. I mean, not a detail about the story, but I think an implication of the story, what Jesus was doing in that story. And if you're familiar with the story, you know that Lazarus and his two sisters, Mary and Martha, were close friends of Jesus. And Jesus would stay at their house when he would get down into the Jerusalem area. Well, when Lazarus got sick, the sisters sent a message up to Jesus and said, "Hey, our brother's sick, why don't you come?" And Jesus intentionally delayed and didn't get down there until 4 days after Lazarus had died. And when he went there, he saw the grief, the sadness in the sisters, Martha and Mary. And, they came out to talk to Jesus and told him, if you'd been here, if you'd only been here, we've seen what you can do. You could have healed him. And when Jesus saw Mary, after he spoken to Mary, it says this in verse 33, and I think there's two things that Jesus is trying to bring out. When Jesus saw her crying, and that was Mary, and the Jews who had come with her crying, he was deeply moved in his spirit and troubled. "Where have you put him?" he asked. "Lord," they told him, "come and see." And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." And here you see that Jesus was looking at this situation. His friend Lazarus has died. His two friends, Mary and Martha and others, were in sadness, weeping and crying. And it says his heart was troubled and he wept himself. And so you see all this happening. And I think Jesus wanted us to see the reality of death. I think he wanted us to see that he cares about what we go through when we see death, when we see the result of sin, when we see what happens to humanity when humanity sinned. And it's awful. It's horrible. Jesus was moved by it. It's not what he intended for his creation. And so we see the horrificness of death. And then Jesus had told them just before that, in verse 23, he told them, your brother's going to rise again. And Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day." But Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me, even if he dies, will live. Everyone who lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" I mean, that's the most important question you can ask, is do you believe that Jesus is the resurrection and the life? And so what he did, the reality of death was there, and what he was going to do, he was going to go into that tomb and say, "Hey, Lazarus, come out." And Lazarus was going to raise from the dead and come out. All of a sudden, you see side by side, you see that the impact of death and the sorrow and sadness, and all of a sudden, you see a physical resurrection. You see Lazarus come forth to life. Do you think there was joy at that point in time? Do you think that they were praising God for what happened, that Lazarus was able to, I don't know if he hopped out of the tomb, he's all wrapped up and Jesus told him to unwrap him when he got out. Like, can you imagine what was happening? And all of a sudden he's showing the reality of death, the reality of resurrection. And I think sometimes in our minds, and even in mine, it's like we got to be careful because all of a sudden death is an abstraction. We don't want to deal with it. We don't want to think about it. That's happening to other people some other time. I've got a long time to live. I don't even want to go there. And even the resurrection and the new life, well, yeah, those are concepts, and those will be great. But Jesus came, and I think, yes, he wanted to show he was God, but he also wanted to show the twin realities. And the reality that when Jesus comes, we are going to be resurrected is just as real as Lazarus being resurrected, and it's eternal. It's forever. It's a joy that will never end. We should be rejoicing. And so I would challenge each of us as I was thinking about this, because some people, when they reach death or they get a terminal diagnosis, it's not only are they dying, but it seems like the faith in God that they had dies. And other people stand firm. Other people, when they get to that point of crisis, their faith increases. Their faith comes alive. They depend on God. And that's what I want us to end with here. Here's the bottom line. Do you believe this? Because if you do, you will be able to face that crisis because you have put God's word in your heart. And he will be able to help you. His grace and mercy to help you in your time of need. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next time on The Bottom Line.